Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Ashanti Lewis, Director of Federal Government Relations at Food Corps, and I'm here with Salam Bhatti, formerly of FRAC. We're jumping back into a conversation we started in June when we looked at how proposals in the reconciliation package could impact SNAP and what that would mean for kids, families, and the states working every day to keep them fed. Salam, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us an update. The last time you gave us a phenomenal presentation of the things that could possibly happen, and they turned out that way. And so we would love to hear from you about what is going on and what we should be looking for.
Yeah, thanks for having us back, Ashanti. The big issue that we're going to see once these budgets are shifted to the states is that the states do not have the funding to keep up with these changes, whether it's the administrative cost shift or the benefit cost shift. It's going to be between tens of millions of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars. Even in some states will be like $1 billion or so based on their SNAP benefit receipt. So it's something that we really need to prepare for starting now because a lot of states, or a few states at least, are preparing their budgets. They're especially the states that are looking into their biennium budgets, who do the 2-year budgets. So the conversations need to happen already if they haven't started already. It's already it should have happened 2 weeks ago. If not, let's start right now, where states utilize their rainy day funds to do something about staffing up their agencies that are administering SNAP so that they can be ready for these changes. Now, what a lot of governors are talking about with regards to reducing their error rates so that the cost shift isn't as high or even the cost shift is negligible, the way to do it is to understand that what they'll solve for now is the things that are driving the error rates currently. What we also have to understand is this bill is going to create new errors. Now, remember, errors are not fraud, they're not sinister, they're not malicious. They happen because the program is unduly burdensome. It is unnecessarily complicated, and this bill, unfortunately, makes SNAP even more complicated. So, what we have to remind the governors and the agencies is let's staff up so that we can be ready for the onslaught of all the changes and not let those new errors impact those error rates and increase those error rates, which would increase the costs, which would which would prevent the state from absolutely doing what they're set out to do. Now, we want to also be mindful that we don't want to see any state fail. We want every state to succeed because hunger knows no party. Hunger affects every zip code, every congressional district, everybody. So we really want to make sure that the states are ready to succeed on this, and if they can dip into the rainy day funds to staff up their SNAP administering agencies and be prepared not only to meet these current error rates but the future error rates as well, then they'll be in a good place.
Wonderful. And I love the cameo from the kiddo there. Absolutely fabulous. So thank you
He
for
he
that.
he heard we were talking about food, and he's a grazer, so
Hey, you know what? He's here. He's an advocate
yeah.
in the making, right? Absolutely love it. And thank you for explaining this in a way that is easy to understand and really paints the picture about what is happening and what came out of HR 1, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. A lot to take in, right? And we know that the stakes are high. Given everything that you just shared, where does that leave us now? And what can child advocates do to protect kids and families in the wake of HR 1's passage?
So it was called the Big Beautiful Bill. Now that Trump signed it, it's the Big Beautiful Law. So BBB turned into BBL. And as we know, BBLs can be deadly. So heads up, everybody.
Love it.
A little dark humor. Uh, what child advocates can do is really pay attention to what's going on in their school board meetings. In Virginia, for example, at the Gloucester County School Board meeting, they recently voted to do away with free school meals. So that's a huge impact. That doesn't come out of the BBL. It's just something that happened locally. Now, as we know, all politics is local. So keep an eye on what's going on in your school board meetings. Uh, Keep an eye on what's happening in your state assemblies as well. Figure out who your state delegate is if you don't know them yet and befriend them, because a lot of people don't know that the state assembly people exist. So get to know who they are, what their passions are, and if they're not pushing for things regarded to food access, hunger relief, school meals, then they will know somebody, one of their colleagues, who is doing that, and they can get you connected with them so you can become an advocate within your states. So that's where we're going to have to really focus on how we can deliver the best we can for our neighbors by focusing on our localities and focusing on what's going on within the states.
Great advice, Salam. Thank you so much. As the changes in HR1 or BBL have real consequences for kids and families, but there's still so much we can do. Again, advocacy doesn't end when a bill is signed. It shifts, it adapts, and it keeps on going. Whether it's raising your voice in your community, connecting with lawmakers, as Salam said, or supporting organizations on the front line, every action matters. Together, we can push back and make sure every child has the nutrition they need to thrive. So thank you again, Salam. It was wonderful seeing you.
Thank you for the time.
Absolutely.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So today's session is the fifth installment in our ongoing series, More Hopeful Futures or Children as Collateral Damage. Over the past few months, we've been examining how policy choices, whether intended or not, can either center children or sideline them. In each conversation, we've asked the critical question, are children being lifted up in our public systems or left behind? The first session examined the evolving role of the federal government in education, focusing on the children and families who may be affected by proposed policy changes. Our second session zeroed in on the unique challenges facing children and immigrant families, exploring how current and shifting policies affect their well-being. In the third session, we examined Medicaid's essential role in child's health and development and what's at stake across all of our public systems when that lifeline is threatened. Most recently, we came together to discuss how we might strengthen and evolve Head Start, building on its legacy to expand its reach, deepen its impact, and meet the moment we're in. And today we turn our attention to SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which touches the lives of over 14 million children and stands as one of the most effective tools we have to reduce child hunger, improve health outcomes, and support early learning. In this session, we'll explore the far-reaching benefits of SNAP, the threats posed by proposed funding cuts, and why protecting and strengthening this program is essential to building more hopeful, equitable futures for all children. And with that, I'm excited to introduce to you and be in conversation with today's speakers. Please note that a link to their full bios will be placed in the chat. So today we are joined by Rocio Perez, policy analyst with UnidosUS, Salam Bhatti, SNAP Director, Food Research and Action Center, Alexis Bylander, who is the Interim Director of Child Nutrition Program and Policy, also at FRAC, Daniela Spoto, Director of Food Equity at Hawaii Appleseed, and Callan Wells, Senior Manager of Early Childhood Health Policy at the Georgia Early Education Alliance for Ready Students. And last but certainly not least, I'm excited to thank and introduce our moderator, Ashanti Lewis, who is the Director of Federal Government Relations at Food Corps. Ashanti Lewis is a seasoned public policy professional with over 20 years of experience advancing food and nutrition equity at the state and federal levels. She currently leads federal policy and national partnerships at Food Corps, driving efforts to ensure all children have access to food education and nutritious school meals. Ashanti holds a Master of Public Policy from UNLV and has recently elected to the Board of Directors of the Montgomery County Food Council. She lives in Rockville, Maryland. With that, Ashanti, welcome, and thank you again.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for being here for the fifth session in our More Hopeful Futures or Children as Collateral Damage series. Today, we focus on SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, a critical yet often underappreciated support for millions of children across the country. Nearly half of all SNAP recipients are children. Let that sink in. SNAP helps put food on the table, but it also improves birth outcomes, reduces hospital visits, strengthens early learning, and promotes long-term educational achievement. It is hands down one of the most effective investments we make in child well-being, and yet it is under threat, like always, it seems. Current federal proposals could cut SNAP by nearly 30%. That's not just a budget number, it's a direct blow to the 34 million children whose health, development, and future opportunity hinge on stable nutrition. These cuts would have deep, disproportionate impacts, especially in Latino and low-income communities, where SNAP is often the front line against hunger and hardship. And the impact doesn't stop with SNAP. A threat to SNAP is a threat to the broader web of programs families rely on, such as Medicaid, WIC, early learning supports. These systems are interconnected, and when one is weakened, the others struggle to hold families up. Our goal today is to move beyond headlines and talk about what's really at stake: children's futures, community health, and economic stability. You'll hear from experts and practitioners who will help us understand the scope of this issue and what we can do together to advocate for smart, compassionate, and effective policy. This is a moment that demands urgency, empathy, and action. And on a personal level, my family, like most families everywhere across the country and around the world, have experienced a very rough patch in our lives. As a child, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. My dad was an immigrant new to the United States, and my grandparents were sick and in need of in-home care. SNAP, then called food stamps, and I know I'm dating myself and I'm fine for that, changed our lives. I don't know where I would be without that program. And I say this to you because many of our neighbors are experiencing this sort of thing. We are glad you're here with us. We invite you to stay connected. We want you to engage, raise your voice, and be part of the collective effort to ensure that programs like SNAP continue to nourish not just our bodies, but our futures. Please ask questions. No question is too big or small. And let's build community here today and engage with all the experts joining us during this webinar. With that said, I am excited to now invite Rocio to the screen to help us set the stage by providing us an overview of the current landscape of SNAP. Welcome, Rocio.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm super honored to be here, and I hope I can share some insight on what's going on right now at the federal level. Next slide, please. So this is sort of the outline of my presentation, where we'll talk about the proposed changes to Medicaid and SNAP, as well as some of our findings from a recent child health report and some of the implications. Next slide. So where are we now? As you may recall, in May, the House passed the big, beautiful bill that proposed the largest cuts to life-saving programs that assisted families across the U.S. The cuts to Medicaid, ACA, and SNAP together would exceed more than $1 trillion, and each of these cuts would by far be the largest ever to these programs. We are looking at $864 billion in cuts to Medicaid, as well as $319 billion cuts to SNAP, eliminating almost 30% of all federal support for the next 10 years. Most recently, the Congressional Budget Office found that 16 million people will be uninsured, and on top of that, 7 million people will lose SNAP due to these cuts. Currently, the Senate is considering the bill, and as we saw what happened with the House, they are moving extra fast to have it on the president's desk, and according to our sources, by the end of this month. So we are very much in crucial time. Next slide. This bill would affect everyone, adults and children alike. But even then, there are some cuts and changes that will particularly affect children, such as work requirements for parents with children 7 and older who may otherwise be exempt. The reconciliation bill changes will make it harder for families to qualify for SNAP, disproportionately harming children, and overall making it harder for families to meet their basic food needs. I want to take this moment to acknowledge that it is very important to remember that most people who participate in SNAP who can work already do work. This bill not only would cut funding for SNAP, but it would also add a barrier to accessing SNAP. Next slide, please. So our report asked the question, how many children are at risk from the attacks on Medicaid and SNAP, and who are these children? Next slide. Our report was written in collaboration with First Focus and AFL-CIO. We thank them for their contributions and their insights. Next slide. We found that 34 million children rely on Medicaid and SNAP or both for healthcare and food. This number could actually be higher considering that our findings were based on ACS 2023 year data. And so we caution that our estimates may underreport the actual number of children who are in danger of losing access to these programs. Next slide. As mentioned before, the bill would harm adults and children alike. However, children are at special risk. We found that in 2023, nearly 45% of all children rely on one or both programs, contrast to 23% of adults under the age of 65. In other words, fewer than 1 in 4 adults under age 65 rely on these programs. So as we can see, the risk is almost double for children. Next slide. We took a look at the race and ethnicity of these children, and we found that Children of all races and communities are in danger, but those from marginalized communities face an especially high risk. For example, 35% of all children who rely on either Medicaid or SNAP are Latino. That is equivalent to 11.7 million Latino children. We also found that 90% of all children who rely on either of these programs are African American. That is 6.4 million African American children. Looking at it big picture, overall, 66% are children of color who would be in danger of losing health insurance and access to food. And that is why it is important to talk about these cuts together, because we can see that it would severely harm all children. Next slide. We also looked at a subset of children, and that is children with working class parents. We define working class parents as those who are in the labor force and do not have a four-year degree. We found that 25 million children who rely on Medicaid for healthcare or SNAP for food come from families headed by such parents. In other words, 3 in 4 children that rely on Medicaid for healthcare or SNAP for food have working class parents. To put it into perspective, members of Congress in both parties say they care about working class families, that they are for working class families, that they want to protect working class families. But as we have already seen, House members have already voted for the bill that would directly harm these families. And now senators need to understand that voting for this bill would negatively affect the very families that they are advocating for and they say they care about by kicking families out of these programs that keep them healthy, food costs low, and help them live longer, healthier lives. Next slide. Zooming out for a bit, we also found that children across red and blue states are in danger of losing access to healthcare and food. As shown in this table, states where more than 1 million children benefit from Medicaid or SNAP include states all over the US, from the West Coast to the Midwest to the South to the East Coast. Children everywhere are in danger. If a senator from any of these states votes for the bill, they will have a direct impact on the livelihood of these children. For example, if senator from California votes for this bill, they'd be jeopardizing the well-being of 4.3 million children and voting for a bill that hurts their state the most compared to any other state. That would be true for Texas. They are the state with the second most to lose coverage for and SNAP access for children. Next slide. We also ranked states on the percentage of children who are at risk, and we identified 9 states where half of children or more rely on Medicaid or SNAP for health and access to food. As you can see, most of them are southern states, states that are in great danger of children losing access to healthcare and food. And so these are facts that representatives from these states should know. And it is important that representatives understand that their vote will have a direct impact on the development and life of these children. We are looking at, for example, 65% of all children who benefit from Medicaid or SNAP would lose access to these programs. 59% of children in Louisiana, 52% of children in Mississippi, and the list goes on. Next slide. So up to this point, so far, we've been talking about about 2 groups, children who have Medicaid but not SNAP, and children who have SNAP but not Medicaid. We also took a look at a third group, and this is a group we considered who are in double jeopardy, and that is children who get both Medicaid and SNAP. We found that there are 14 million children who fall into this group, and specifically, these are children that tend to be the very youngest. In fact, 20% of all children under the age of 5 in 2023 got both Medicaid and SNAP compared to just 16% of teenagers. As research has shown, and as Ashanti has explained, these are critical years for child development, cognitive development, brain development, and these programs statistically have shown that it is impactful for children to have longer, healthier lives, and it helps parents keep their families healthy and happy. Next slide. With all that said, here are some of the implications. Next slide. And that is that this bill would put millions of children across the US in danger, particularly very young children, disproportionately harm very young children and children of color, and children in working class families. I hope that these findings I've shared have put in context how dangerous this bill is, while also being helpful for your advocacy. Thank you for your time.
Rosia, thank you so much for providing us with that data. You did a beautiful job setting the stage as we dive into our first panel discussion. As I mentioned during my introduction, SNAP is one of the most effective tools we have to reduce child poverty and food insecurity, but it is also more than that. It is a critical link to a web of supports that help children thrive, from health and nutrition to school access. Today, we'll explore both the direct and ripple effects of proposed SNAP reductions and why protecting this program is essential to any serious effort to center children in policy. We are joined by two incredible experts from the Food Research and Action Center. We all know them as FRAC, Salam Bhatti, who is the SNAP director, and Alexis Bylander, interim director of Child Nutrition Programs and Policy. Welcome, you two. Huge welcome to both of you. Let's jump right in. Salam, we will start with you, if that's okay. FRAC has raised the alarm about three significant threats to SNAP: freezing the Thrifty Food Plan, shifting administrative costs to states, and expanding time limits. Can you walk us through those proposals and why they would mean and what they would mean for children and their families?
Happy to. Thanks, Ashanti, for that question. And hey, everybody. I'm going to share a presentation that walks us through these cuts and just breaks it down into some numbers. I'm going to share my screen here. See. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This is a part of a presentation series that I call "What Do You Mean?" because it's an explainer. We want to make it a little fun. What do you mean? So what do you mean? We've got some meme explainers throughout the presentation. So let's talk about what we're talking about today. What do you mean? Reconciliation. So what is that? That is a word that is getting thrown around a lot. And it is essentially a long process. And you're going to hear this word again and again over the course of the summer, although I'm trying to rebrand it as ping pong summer, because what we started off with from the House, putting this bill forward that we're talking a lot about, we're going to talk about the details today. It's now in the Senate. The Senate is going to walk a lot of these cuts back, which is still not a good thing. And then it's going to get sent back to the House. And then it's supposed to go to the White House, but we really don't know how much they're going to go back and forth on this. So that's where we are. And this is what we're seeing in how they're trying to reconcile these cuts. So first meme of today, the House majority is going around doing their thing, and they're going to try to cut over $1 trillion from basic needs programs of Medicare, Medicaid, and SNAP. They've put this bill through. They've passed it from the House. And all conservative media is talking about is Biden. They keep talking about former President Biden. A recent analysis showed that the entertainment show called Fox and Friends did a 30-to-1 chat about, or they talked about Biden 30 times more than they talked about Medicaid. And it's Biden mentioned 30 times, Medicaid mentioned once. Now, this is an issue because a poll was done that showed over 50% of likely voters don't even know what's in the budget bill. A few months ago, there was another survey done that showed over 80% of voters, and this includes both Democrats and Republicans. And when you broke down the numbers for Democrats and Republicans, a majority in both parties are against cuts in any of these basic needs programs. So what we're seeing is that there's a huge disconnect across the country where people simply don't know that these cuts are in the bill, and if they did, they would be against them. So we really have to make sure we're getting the messaging out of what really is in this bill. So hopefully we can help resolve that in today's discussion, and then you can be the bearers of this information to your circles and informing them. So top line message of what we should be cognizant of. These are the deepest cuts in SNAP history. It's around $300 billion, as mentioned before. It's roughly 30% of the budget. It would radically restructure the program, which would or could lead to additional cuts. And we'll go into how that looks. And then ultimately, it takes food assistance away from households with children, seniors, and people with disabilities, and pretty much everybody else on the program. And this is especially concerning because poverty has not been solved, hunger has not been solved, and the USDA itself reports that food insecurity has increased in this country for the last for 3 years in a row. And also, grocery prices are increasing at a pace higher than ever. So the answer isn't cutting the very program that helps with food assistance. So let's talk about one of the cuts that's being proposed. It is known as an unfunded mandate because here's why. So the federal government fully funds the SNAP benefit that people get. What this House bill proposes is shifting that cost and making at least 5% of that cost go to the states. Now you might think, oh, 5%, that's not that bad. We can do it. We'll go into the numbers and show you how actually that's a huge amount, because I said at least 5%. The House bill attaches something known as payment error rates to how high that cost shift could be. It could get to as high as 25% of the SNAP budget. So let's look at a hypothetical. I live in Virginia. If anybody's in Richmond, give me a shout. I'd love to hang out. Virginia had a 9.86% error rate in 2023. 2023 is the most recent data that we have. And you might think, oh, 9.86%, it's pretty low. SNAP is a very complex formula. We can anticipate errors going to happen. But according to the House bill proposal, 9.86% is high enough to fall into the 20% cut category, which is the second highest cut category, 25% being the highest. So what does that look like? In fiscal year 2024, Virginians received over $1.76 billion in SNAP benefits. If any of y'all are good at math, you already did the numbers. Otherwise, here's what it looks like. Virginia would have to budget $353 million just for 1 year for SNAP benefits, if this at all existed in the past. Now, Virginia operates on a biennium. So that means in one budget, they'd have to budget for about $700 million to go towards SNAP benefits. And if you're a state advocate or you've got state advocate experience, you know that states don't have money like this. So we'll talk about what kind of effect that will have. Another cut that's proposed in this bill is shifting how the administration of SNAP is funded. Right now, it is a 50-50 split. So the federal government pays 50%, the state puts in another 50% for the administration of SNAP within the state. This bill proposes a shift. So 25% coming from the federal government and shifting it up for the state at 75%. What's that look like? Virginia, for example, about a 50% split right there, 174 million from Virginia, 175 from the federal government. What this adjustment would look like is an additional 87 million on top of that 174. So really, on a biennium, this is closer to $1 billion. $1 billion to go towards the SNAP program. Virginia does not have that. So what does that mean? What's the shockwave going to be here? It's going to impact broad-based cat health. What do you mean? Great question, Justin. I'll tell you. So broad-based categorical eligibility is colloquially known as SNAP expansion. A lot of states have put this through. And when states put this through, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people are now newly eligible for SNAP. And these are people who are, usually it's up to 200% of the federal poverty level. So that gets them into the door and they go through all the other eligibility stuff. But it's great. And it brings in a lot of people who need the program. So if states are now burdened with these new cost shifts that we just talked about, then they're going to have to pull back on SNAP expansion so that they can make the program more affordable for people. Now, what this could mean is that, and Alexis is going to get into this, but this is going to have an impact on school meals. And that's because you have children within these families. And if the families are entirely removed from the program, then the children lose their direct certification for free school meals. So that's part of that ripple, that's part of that shockwave that essentially happens. So anytime you hear somebody saying that children will not be impacted, school meals will not be impacted, that's a lie. And here's how that's happening. So what does all this mean? People are talking about waste, fraud, and abuse, but what does this actually mean? It's actually trying to eliminate the programs. And we've been talking about this, and the Congressional Budget Office came out with this remark as well, that this program, SNAP, could become so unaffordable for the state that they may pull out of the program entirely. So this ideation of a $300 billion cut could be the floor if states are pulling out of the program entirely. And let me tell you that if you've ever worked at a food pantry, food bank, you know there's no infrastructure in place to take over for what SNAP can do. The data shows that for every meal that a food bank or a food pantry can provide, SNAP can provide 9. It's only $6.16 on average per person per day, but it's still much better than what else is out there. That long arm of the government is super critical and helpful for people in need. So what are some other deep cuts? Real quick. What do you mean? Okay, I'll tell you. They're work related. And work related, they say work requirements. We like to call them time limits because it's essentially putting a time limit on a basic human right, that basic human right being food. And that time limit is you will only be able to get SNAP for 3 months in a 36-month period if you are an able-bodied adult without dependents, meaning you're essentially fit for work and you don't have any kids. That was the definition up until this House bill proposal. It's still the definition, but this is how the House bill proposes to change that. Right now, a dependent is considered somebody who is below the age of 18. The House bill proposes changing that to children under the age of 7. So this means that single parents who have a child over the age of 7 are going to be required to work 20 hours a week or 80 hours a month, work or volunteer or go to school for 80 hours a month to continue to remain eligible for SNAP benefits. If you're already thinking like, how is that rational? How is that practical? You're exactly right. It's not possible to be a parent, a single parent at that, and try to get all of these things to happen on a consistent level. So what this essentially is doing is removing people from the program. That's the goal here. It's not a savings, it's a cut. They also want to increase the older adults age limit from 54 to 64. Again, same thing, huge issue. CBO estimates that 3 million people in this age bracket would be removed from the program or risk their eligibility because of these new time limits. And then there's some other just wonky things about changing how states can get waivers for areas with high unemployment or lack of jobs available, which is going to just, again, be a cut and not a savings. It's just going to remove people from the program at very precarious times in their life when it's hard to find a job. And what do you mean? Thrifty food plan, it's so wonky. This is the formula that makes the SNAP benefit. So if you've ever wondered how does that $6 average come about, it's through the thrifty food plan. And for the first time, it was updated in 2019, 2018? I've lost track of time. I thought today was Wednesday for the whole day. So it was updated in the previous Farm Bill. And what it did is it brought the SNAP benefit, it adjusted it to come in with the current dietary guidelines and base off what people are actually buying in stores and current consumption patterns. So with that, the benefit went from about $4.80 per person per day to about $6.16 per person per day. Now, House, or rather the Republicans overall, are not in favor of this adjustment, and they want to freeze that moving forward. And that will also have an impact, not just on SNAP benefits losing their purchasing power over the next decade, again, at a time when food insecurity is rising and grocery store prices are increasing, but it will also have an impact on summer EBT, which Alexis will talk about. So where are we right now? This is where we are. There's a $290 billion cut facing SNAP, and now it's about going to the Senate. But here's the thing. With this House bill proposal, we are taking a 1-mile leap backwards. And if the Senate decreases the harm of the House's cuts, that's still a cut. Moving forward a couple steps is not a win. So we will continue pushing the message that any cut to SNAP must be rejected. And that's the message we are putting out to the Senate. So that's it for my presentation.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful job, Salam. I appreciate you bringing up food banks. I used to work in one, and there is an idea that food banks will be able to pick up the slack, and that is completely false. It is not true. The community cannot take up the slack on that, so I appreciate it. Alexis, we're going to head on over to you. Let's zoom onto the broader ecosystem. SNAP isn't just a nutrition program, it's a gateway to other supports like summer EBT, free school meals through direct certification, something that we at Food Corps are extremely concerned about, and even WIC. Can you explain to us what happens to those systems if access to SNAP is undermined?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the question. And like Salam, I have some slides here to walk through to answer that question. So um, Salam did a really great job of outlining the devastating cuts to SNAP that are here under consideration. And they would have a very harmful effect on the SNAP program itself, but SNAP doesn't operate completely in a bubble. These cuts would have impacts on other programs as well. But before I get into it, I wanted to take just 1 minute to talk about what a great place we are in right now with school meals, so that people have a sense of what is at stake to lose. And so, we have really made so much progress with the school meal programs over the years. We are at a point where research from Tufts University shows that children get their healthiest meals at school. And school meals are on track to get even healthier with limits on sugar and reductions in sodium going into effect in the years ahead. From FRAC's perspective, school meals are so important because they are critical to ensuring that children are food secure. We know that close to 14 million children live in food insecure households in our country, and they get the vast majority of their food during the week from school, and in many cases, the best food that they eat during the week from school. We are also at a point in time where 60% of schools are able to offer free meals to all of their students, either by participating in something called the community eligibility provision, or because they are in a state that has a healthy school meals for all policy. And if you go to the next slide, you can see there are currently 9 states that have healthy school meals for all policies. They're here in green. And the states in yellow are states that have introduced similar legislation. So there is a lot of momentum building for this idea. And there are a lot of places where children, regardless of household income, are eating free meals at school. All right, but going to the next slide, we can talk about how cuts to SNAP would create ripple effects that would hurt school meals. So children in SNAP households are directly certified for free school meals. There is an understanding that there is a need here, both for SNAP benefits and that also these are children that would benefit from free school meals. So any of the cuts that Salam was talking about that would ultimately decrease the number of households receiving SNAP benefits would then decrease direct certification rates. Next slide. What does this mean for families? It means more paperwork and more processes that they need to go through. Students in SNAP households will lose their direct certification for free meals and also their automatic issuance for summer EBT. And summer EBT is a relatively new federal child nutrition program that provides $40 per child per month when kids are out of school so that families can buy groceries. It's meant to in part replace the meals that they get at school when school is out. So by losing direct certification, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will no longer be able to receive free meals at school, but it does mean that they'll need to apply through a school meal application. That means more paperwork for families. And we just know from history that students do fall through the cracks of the application process, and that causes them to lose out on access to key nutrition. Next slide. I wanted to spend just a minute talking about the school meal application. Because some people think like, well, I don't think it would be too hard to fill out the form and to attach income verification information, but for a lot of families, it's more complicated than that. There can be literacy and language barriers to filling out the form. There can be a fear of doing so based on a family's immigration status, and then just plain old, missing the paperwork. I'm a parent of 2 kids, crumpled up papers come home in the backpack all the time. Even the best of parents miss things, and this application can be one of them. What you're seeing on the screen here are the expectations of what families will include as sources of income for their school meal application. For families that have seasonal or multiple part-time jobs, it can be hard to collect all of that information. And it isn't just about income. The form wants you to include information about tips that you receive, other government assistance benefits that you get, alimony and child support payments, if that is applicable, and many other things. And this is a lot of information to gather and to share. And there are a lot of families that don't want to be identified as low income. They don't want it to be known that their kids need food assistance. They're afraid of doing this incorrectly, or this is just more information that they want to share with school staff. And this is a particular problem in small towns when families know the people working in school offices and don't want to share this level of information with the staff. So next slide. The result of all of this is a negative impact for children. So what does it mean for schools? It means an increase in administrative burden. With less kids going through direct certification to qualify for free school meals, it means that schools need to collect, process, and verify more school meal applications. It also means that fewer schools will likely be able to offer free meals to all of their students through community eligibility, because community eligibility is a program that requires a relatively high number of students being directly qualified for free school meals. And another unintended consequence is that with fewer schools using CEP, it would be more expensive for states that have healthy school meals for all policies to have those policies. The contribution that states need to make would likely be higher. Next slide. So the result of all of this is that more children will go hungry at school. And we know that research has shown that children experiencing hunger have a harder time succeeding in class. They're more likely to have behavioral problems and a host of other struggles. And we really all need students at school well-fed and ready to learn, ready to get the most out of their school day. Next slide. So in summary, school meals play a critical role in supporting school nutrition, health, and learning. Cuts to SNAP have ripple effects that harm the school meal program, hurting students and schools. And the call to action here is to urge Congress to oppose cuts to SNAP.
Great. Thank you, Alexis, for the wonderful presentation. Salam, I'm going to ask you a question. I want to turn it over to you again. SNAP's value has been well documented, especially for families in Latino, Black, and low-income communities. But we're also hearing messaging that frames these proposed changes as cost-saving or efficiency moves. Can you speak to the human and economic cost of cutting SNAP, especially for children?
Yeah. Every dollar invested in SNAP has up to a $1.80 economic impact. And this is huge, especially in rural parts of America where that economic impact skews higher because of the smaller connections between people and the vendors. And what this means is that every SNAP dollar is helping the grocery store help keep their lights on or keep their workers employed. It pays the payment processor for processing those payments. It helps pay for the truck driver who's driving the food to the store. It pays the merchant that's labeling the food, and ultimately it's benefiting the farmer who is growing the food. So it's a wonderful economic impact that happens within a few weeks of SNAP receipt, because studies show the SNAP benefit is exhausted within about 3 weeks of receiving it. So it's a fast investment, not into just helping make sure there's food on the table, which should be enough. But when you do good things, it has a great butterfly effect. And here, it's that the whole economy is able to benefit. So if a 30% cut to the program happens, then we'll see retailers losing a huge chunk of their revenue. And that can involve them having to increase their prices to make up for the loss in income. And if more people are unable to afford those increased prices, then they might have to end up closing their doors, which would be a huge impact on food insecurity for the whole community. So these cuts could have a huge shockwave, which is why I call it a shockwave. That would affect families. It would affect children, of course, because hey, my children need like $6 of berries every single day. And that's just the way it is. Kids are growing. I didn't understand the phrase, my kids are eating me out of house and home, until I had them. And that's the truth, right? You want to feed your kids, you want to make sure they're eating well. But if you cut the program that's helping make that happen, then we're in for a bad time.
Great, thank you. Alexis, I know we had another question for you, but it looks like we're at time, so maybe we can circle back at the end if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to you both for laying out the big picture threats facing SNAP and the broader ecosystems of support that connects to it. Now we're going to ground the conversation at the state level. SNAP may be a federal program, but states are where policy becomes reality for families. And when policies shift, whether it's new work requirements or administrative cost burdens, it's local agencies, advocates, and families who feel the impact first and hardest. We're grateful today to be joined by two experts who bring both statewide perspective and deep family-centered expertise. I'd like to invite our second panel to the screen. Again, their full bios are linked in the chat. Daniela Spoto is the Director of Food Equity at Hawaii Appleseed, and Callan Wells is Senior Manager of Early Childhood Health Policy at Georgia Early Education Alliance for Ready Students. Welcome to the screen, both of you. My first question is going to be for Callan. Callan, can you help us understand who SNAP serves in Georgia, specifically among families with young children, and what does the support actually look like on the ground?
Thank you, Ashanti. I just want to start by thanking the Grade Level Reading Campaign for the opportunity to be part of today's panel. It's such an honor to join such respected national and state leaders working on behalf of children and families. Before I dive into the numbers, I want to take a moment to center what SNAP really means for families and in Georgia and across the country. At its core, SNAP means food on the table. For a parent, that is one of the most fundamental ways that we care for our children. SNAP helps parents put their kids to bed with full bellies and send them to school ready to learn. Here in Georgia, SNAP supports more than 700,000 households, including over 213,000 young children. These benefits help families afford groceries, which is critical because in a recent survey commissioned by Gears, 50% of parents with young children indicated that they had difficulty affording food over the previous year. SNAP's impact is especially significant in Georgia's 120 rural counties. We only have 159, so it's a lot of rural counties where residents are more likely to rely on the program than those in suburban or urban areas. It's really a lifeline for these communities. Additionally, SNAP benefits are spent at more than 10,000 retailers across Georgia, supporting local grocery stores, farmers markets, and businesses in every corner of the state. And the impact goes beyond individual families. For every $1 in SNAP benefits spent, Georgia sees a return of between $1.50 and $1.80 in economic activity. According to my colleagues at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, SNAP benefits helped generate more than $343 million in grocery industry wages in our state. It's a smart investment that strengthens both families and local economies.
Thank you, Callan. I appreciate that. Daniela, same question to you. Who are the families who benefit from SNAP in Hawaii, and how are they navigating both high food costs and limited safety net options?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashanti, for inviting me to this panel to share a little bit of the unique perspective that we have in Hawaii. And I know every state has its own unique challenges. In Hawaii, SNAP serves about 160,000 residents. That's about 11% of our population across the state. And about 40% of those are kids. In our state, the populations most impacted by inequities they tend to be Native Hawaiian, Filipino, and other Pacific Islander. And so we see that played out in the families that are really supported by this program. So SNAP helps about 60% of our SNAP population comes from those populations. And you asked how they're navigating. I think the short answer to that is that they're not. They're not navigating the high cost of living here. Hawaii has the highest cost of groceries in the nation. We're about 50 to 60% higher than most other states. The cost of housing is about 80 to 90% higher here. And this is not just in urban areas, but also in our rural communities as well. Our utility costs are anywhere from 2 to 3 times higher. Other places, we do get a slightly higher monthly allotment than other states do, but it's not nearly enough. And the way that this is playing out is that, since the pandemic, this has created a sort of perfect storm. There's nowhere for people to go. They can't move out of state or drive to a cheaper place to live. And so what we're seeing is unsustainable use of our emergency food system. So our food banks are still seeing double the clientele they saw before the pandemic. And now they're seeing their federal funding being dramatically cut by this administration as well. We also have the highest rate of homelessness of any state in the nation. It's really an epidemic here. People are literally choosing to live in their cars or in tent cities. I walk around my neighborhood, and the number of tent cities that I see now is astounding compared to what it was 10 or 15 years ago. So people are literally just not making ends meet. SNAP is one of the strongest lifelines that people have. And we know that even though it's not enough, it's the only thing coming between some families and literally not being able to feed children. So we also have seen that it's extremely helpful in supporting local business, as Kellen and also Salam have mentioned. And we have a really successful program here, Double Up Food Bucks program, that incentivizes purchases of locally grown fruits and vegetables. It's been a huge benefit to our local farmers and to our local food retailers. And so just on top of the loss of benefits, the impact to our food economy is pretty huge. And so it's a great lifeline for Hawaii.
Very enlightening and eye-opening. Thank you for that. I appreciate you bringing up cuts to other federal programs like LFPA and the different grants that food banks get. It's very hard for all of us right now, so I appreciate you sharing that. Back to you, Callan. Proposed changes like expanding work reporting requirements and time limits may sound technical, but they have real impact. Can you speak to what these policies would mean for Georgia families, especially those juggling childcare, unstable work hours, or caring for infants?
Yes, thank you. What we know about work requirements is that the administrative burden of reporting them often leads to people losing benefits, even those who are working. We're already seeing this in Georgia. Although more than 240,000 individuals are likely eligible for our Medicaid Pathways program, which has work requirements, fewer than 7,000 are actually enrolled. And that's not because they don't qualify, it's because the process is too difficult and the reporting requirements are too burdensome. SNAP is designed to be there when life takes unexpected turns, like when someone loses a job. It's a program that helps fill in the gaps and provide stability during those times. While the House's proposal calls for caregivers with young children to be exempted from these work requirements, we know that caring for children, especially children with complex medical needs or disabilities, extends beyond age 7. Many parents are caught in that sandwich generation caring for children and older or disabled relatives. These parents are working, just not in ways that meet these narrow policy definitions, putting them at risk of losing these SNAP benefits. I could share numerous examples of why some adults are unable to work. You've already heard many today, but I just really want to reiterate that even working adults could lose benefits under these rules, especially if states are required to take on these significant administrative costs.
Thank you. Daniela, one proposal on the table would shift more SNAP administrative costs to states. Basically the same question. That can mean less capacity to serve families. What would that kind of shift look like in Hawaii, especially given the state's high cost of living and rural geography, as you mentioned?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I already talked about the high cost of living, and we're sort of already in this really tenuous situation. But another way in that Hawaii is unique, and this will affect all states, but Hawaii has the only single statewide school district in the nation. So our state Department of Education, which in most states is overseeing school districts, actually employs every public school principal, teacher, cafeteria staff person, custodian. They get their salaries from the state Department of Education, and it oversees the statewide school district. So Unlike a lot of other school districts which are administered by municipalities, we don't have the ability to use property taxes to cover our public education. So it's all coming from the same pot that also administers the SNAP program. And so what this means is Salam talked about the different cost share models. We're unsure which one we'd fall in, but under that 25% cost share model that Salam talked about, we would be responsible for about 185 million in benefits that are currently funded by the federal government, and other states it's much, much higher. But for a state as small as us that does fund its entire public education system from, ground up, that's going to be, literally competing with teacher salaries. That would be more than 2,700 teacher salaries. It's about more than a quarter of our teachers. And our state quite simply can't pay for that. And so what will happen is benefits will either be cut for every household, or more people will lose it, in addition. What Colin was talking about with the extended time limits and work requirements, they're proposing to extend that to families with school-aged children. Right now, they are exempt from those requirements. So that would be, that's already looking to impact about 22,000 residents that are on SNAP. So this is on top of that. So we don't know how many other families would be impacted under this cost share scenario that's being proposed. So yeah, every state I think is bracing themselves for how are we going to pay for this, and looking at how can we raise taxes, on folks. And that's just another burden that people are going to have to think about how we're going to pay for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for your answer. Callan, in our last panel, we talked about how losing SNAP can ripple into other programs. The House proposal calls for the full elimination of SNAP Ed, the education arm of SNAP. Can you speak to what's at stake if this program is eliminated, and what kind of impact that could have on the health and well-being of SNAP participants, especially children and families?
Course. SNAP Ed provides nutrition education to families across the state, but it does more than that. It really encourages family bonding through cooking together, fosters a love of nature through gardening programs, and helps families make their SNAP dollars go further. Here in Georgia, SNAP Ed has reached more than 40,000 individuals. For example, our partners at Quality Care for Children have utilized SNAP Ed funds to help 15 childcare programs build and maintain teaching gardens. They've improved menus in another 30 childcare programs and reached thousands with educational programming and a produce-focused cookbook. Eliminating this program would mean losing this valuable tool that supports health, well-being, and community connection, especially for families and young children.
Thank you. I don't think SNAP Ed gets enough credit and gets talked about enough, so I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront today. Thank you. And our last question, Daniela, is for you. Picking up on that ripple effect, how do you see proposed SNAP cuts intersecting with other programs in Hawaii, like summer EBT? And what's at stake if millions lose access not just to food assistance, but to wraparound supports that SNAP helps to unlock?
Yeah, we've already talked a little bit about the importance of, I don't know if we've used the term direct certification, but basically the fact that folks that are already enrolled in SNAP don't have to fill out that onerous paperwork, and they just get sort of automatically enrolled in that program. That's really huge. I think that that's going to be a really difficult thing for schools and families to absorb if a lot of those kids are not turning in their paperwork and then not being enrolled. And same goes for summer EBT. We just got that program off the ground. It's been getting rave reviews. It's a huge help during the summer months when school is out. Like Georgia and like a lot of other states, we have a lot of really rural communities that are not close to places where they can easily access food during the summer or summer programs. And so having the ability to just have that additional cash is really important, in particular for those rural communities. And then I also mentioned just the impact on local businesses. Summer EBT, like SNAP, is a huge economic stimulus. It's an infusion into local food retailers and to our local farmers during the summer months that now we're not going to be able to receive anymore. And in a place where we're really trying to brace ourselves and become more food secure and not as reliant on shipments coming in from the continent, we're really bracing ourselves for the impact of that.
Great. Thank you to you both. I appreciate you being on with us today and providing such wonderful insights into both of your states. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. We have completed the panel portion of the program today. Thank you again to all of our speakers for your powerful insights grounded in data, lived experience, and policy expertise. From national trends to on-the-ground realities in states like Georgia and Hawaii, you've painted a clear and urgent picture of what's at stake for children and families. Now we want to open the floor to you, our audience, and invite all of our panelists back onto the screen to answer your questions. Again, please drop questions in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear what is on your mind. And you know what, Alexis, I think we're going to circle back to you if that's okay. We were talking about direct certification and the ripple effects of school meals. And so I would love to know, see, what are the unintended or perhaps unacknowledged consequences of disrupting the eligibility pipeline?
Yeah, well, there just were a few things here I wanted to highlight. I think the interconnection between SNAP and WIC, which has adjunctive eligibility, meaning that if you are on SNAP, you're also likely eligible for WIC if you meet the requirements, and there's an easier pathway to get those benefits and connections to summer EBT and school meals. So really, like, what we have are programs that serve children and families, and they serve their own individual purposes, but they're also really interconnected, and they're part of a system that we have in place to try to ensure that people in our country have their most basic needs met, particularly children. And when you dismantle or cut one part of the system, there are implications for the other components. And what we have at risk right now is rolling back years of progress that we have made in school meals and investments that we have chosen to make in supporting child nutrition and learning. And so there's just a lot at stake right now with what is being considered as part of budget reconciliation.
Great. Thank you, Alexis. I appreciate that. I'm reading from another format here, so please excuse me. But first question, who are other allies who could join the opposition to cuts? For example, U.S. farmers are also part of the SNAP program. They get paid to provide food for SNAP. Also, grocery stores from customers spending EBT benefits. Which communities are dealing with these cuts?
Yeah, happy to take that on. I would say, I'm hearkening back to when I was a state advocate and working to expand SNAP with the categorical eligibility. And we had historically always used anti-hunger groups, and it always failed. But what we changed was included grocery stores, we included banks, we included healthcare organizations. We didn't include some other groups, but this was a good enough, diverse enough coalition that helped get it to pass. Now we're seeing a lot more need for those voices, and also farmers. City and county organizations would be helpful, especially to talk more about the budget. Governors as well, if governors can start calling at least the senators, that would be super helpful. Medical practitioners and their organizations would also be absolutely critical, not just to talk with the elected officials, but also to message to the public. There was a recent poll that was done that showed that people are more trusting of medical practitioners when it comes to this type of information, above and beyond political elected officials. So if you have medical practitioners you can work with to do like social media videos, talk about the impact of these cuts, that could go a long way.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and sorry, and the committees that are working on these cuts, both in the House and the Senate, are the agriculture committees.
Thank you for your clarification. We have another question here. What lessons can we take from past policy fights to inform how we push back effectively now?
I'll say one thing kind of related to what I just said about making sure it's a diverse coalition. And I'll say that based on, we've come to meetings over the past few months in Congress, and the staff we've met with just say point blank, we love meeting with the anti-hunger advocates, but you don't have the power. Right now, you just don't have the power. Where is industry in this? And you may have seen that industry is not really around, except the National Grocers Association, NGA, doing phenomenal work. FMI is also another organization now coming into the fray as well. So if you have local state grocers, it's really important that they their associations come together and come out against it. That's one voice that would definitely shift the tide in this fight.
I agree. When I did state work, the associations were so important to helping us to pass bills. I mean, everything from the restaurant association to, you know, local farmers and all of those good folks. So I would say to reach out to them to get their voices. Although they're facing some battles as well, but the anti-hunger community cannot do it alone. Do we have any more thoughts on that question? Yes, no, maybe so. All right. We've got another one here. How can advocates ensure that children, especially those in low income or immigrant families, stay at the center of the SNAP conversation moving forward?
Jump in. We do every year, Strolling Thunder. 0 to 3 does this nationally. Gears does it locally in our state, where we bring young children with their families to the Capitol. And so they are able to really voice their needs and share their stories directly with legislators. And to Salam's point, as advocates, we have good relationships with our local legislators, with our congressional delegation, but nothing means as much as having families there with you. So for state advocates, for national advocates, really bringing families to the table and having them share their stories and their experiences, I think really visibly centers children in the experience. And seeing a young child in your office, it's hard to say, no, I don't want to feed young children, right? So I think of it as, you know, we call it Strolling Thunder. We bring the strollers in, we kind of carry them up the steps of the Capitol. It's this really physical understanding of what it means to be a parent of a young child. And I think it's really powerful.
I love that. I think that works at the state level and the federal level to have those advocates right there. And it's a great experience for them to get to talk about what's happening in their lives. So lovely answer. Thank you. Does anyone else want to contribute to that? All right. We have another question from the audience. As SNAP is connected to the free and reduced food program, what impact will this have in supporting or reducing the Title I program and resources?
So the number of children that access free and reduced, or that are eligible for free and reduced price meals, is often used as a proxy to show the level of poverty or need in school districts. But Title I funding is allocated to school districts based on another metric, but the free and reduced price rates by school can be used to determine how Title I funding is divided up within the district. So the overall allocation to the district wouldn't change, but changes to SNAP that may lead to more kids going through the process of being qualified for free meals might have an impact on in-district allocations.
Thank you, Alexis. We have another question. Is there data that shows the proportion of young adults, high school graduates, early 20s, who rely on SNAP benefits just as they enter the workforce? Are there any concerns around impacts for this age group, or are they considered lower risk given the expectation that they should be able to enter the workforce?
Yeah, there's data on this, and I can share a link in the chat about the age breakdown on SNAP benefits or for SNAP benefits. But yeah, are there any concerns around impacts for this age group? There is with the House bill proposal, yes, because it's lifting some of the waivers that states can implement if there is, for example, for right now, if there is a high unavailability of jobs, then the state can waive the time limit for this age group. The House bill proposes removing that provision of high unavailability of jobs and only relying on an unemployment percentage of 10% 10% unemployment or greater. Now, I think there's only about a dozen counties in the entire country that have over 10% unemployment. You can see where this is going, where again, it's not a savings, it's a cut, and people would be left without SNAP benefits at a very critical time when they don't even have jobs available in their area.
Right. What about foster children? Is there anything there? I get asked that a lot.
Yeah, there was a provision in the CRA a few years ago that changed some of the time limits, and what this did was said that if you were in foster care on your 18th birthday, then you are not subjected or you are exempt from the time limit up until the age of 24. Now that's going to sunset in October 2030. So that was just a temporary exemption for now. Who knows if it'll get extended.
Right. I think we have another one here in the chat box. How do you convince chambers of commerce and restaurant associations who always come out against raises in a living wage that not supporting their workers with a higher wage will allow them to meet work requirements for receipt of SNAP? Getting their kids into childcare so they themselves can work or go to school, etc., is good for their business.
That's a heavy question, but I'll take a stab. You know, our organization, in addition to doing anti-hunger work, we do a lot of wage and labor advocacy as well. And you know, I think one of the things we have to do is first of all, to find the businesses that are already doing this, that understand it, and bring them into the conversation in a meaningful way. So for them to say, look, I run a really successful restaurant. I pay a living wage. It's worth it for me. And that's why we're able to be successful and to be able to show that it's possible. So that when people try to say it's not possible, you can say, actually, that's not true. So that's one way. And then I think just the conversation around, okay, if you're not going to provide these benefits as a business, then you have to be okay with paying higher taxes so that the government can pay it. So which is it going to be? You can't be both anti-tax and also anti-worker. You have to decide, which one you're going to support, because if you're not going to pay a living wage, then the government is going to have to provide safety nets.
Great. Does anyone else want to contribute to that question, or we're good to go? All right. Well, we can go ahead and close out. I would love for each of our speakers to share some final reflections to end with opportunities and solutions so that we end on a positive note about how we can go forward. So the question is, what gives you hope, or what opportunities do you see in this moment that we're in? And what's one action you want our audience to take after this webinar to help protect SNAP and support children's well-being? Does anyone want to go first? I can pick on the screen. Rosia, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I was hoping.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was trying to give like a really amazing answer. I think I'll talk about opportunities in terms of my role. So oftentimes I get approached to do data analysis. And I think the type of data analysis that people approach me with is sort of kind of complicated, or made to be complicated. And the reality is there's a lot of great resources out there that can help with data analysis and storytelling. And I truly believe that using stories to humanize data would be, at the state level, would be more impactful than at the federal level. Back in back in my day, I remember doing a project where it dealt with pandemic EBT, and I was able to interview pandemic EBT recipients in California, English, Spanish, and Chinese. And that report, I was able to also do different types of data analysis, and it was used by the government to get more funding. And I think that combining both quantitative and qualitative research is incredibly powerful. Creating graphics and increasing social media presence using mixed method research can be powerful, but overall, I think that there's so much we can do with storytelling. And what gives me hope is that there are people still willing to fight this fight for us. And I'm very thankful for the people that came before me to put me in this position where I can keep carrying on this work. And I'm really hopeful that we can do some change. And for the people that are staying up late at night, please take care of yourself. I know the floor is working into the late hours of the night, into the early morning hours. So please do take care of yourself. And I'll end on that note.
Thank you.
I can go next.
Great.
One of the things that I think is really important to continue to note is that advocacy is working. In the Medicaid space, we anticipated per capita caps, we anticipated block granting of Medicaid, and we haven't seen those proposals come to fruition. And so even though the proposals that are currently out there feel really drastic, and they are really drastic, advocacy has made them better than they could have been. And I know that that doesn't feel like a good enough answer. I definitely don't feel like.
All right. I think we lost Callan. I know there was some weather issues in Georgia, so hopefully she'll be able to jump back on and finish her statement. Meanwhile, would anyone else like to go ahead?
That was Zoom decided, no, that's not a good answer.
Right.
Say, you know, I'm going to piggyback what Lucia was saying about take care of yourself. You know, this is a very long journey. It's going to take months to get through this. And it's exhausting already. I didn't even recover from the first Trump administration by the time this started. And I know many others have not as well. So and look at you can barely hear me. I've got a touch of reconciliitis right now. So I will say, just take care of yourselves, find joy in your life. You know, as hard as it might be, please do find joy. Take time off. What you may have noticed already is that the administration likes to submit things or publish things on a Friday night, forcing you to work over the weekend and then get right back into it on Monday. Just this past weekend, we saw what was going on in LA and all the concern that's being focused there, of course. So just know what their patterns are, know how they're trying to exhaust all of us, but also know that there's a lot of us and we're all in this together. So please do take time for yourself, find some joy. And when you have done that, go to frac.org/action. I'll put that in the chat so that you can do some quick little action things for social media and sending an email to your senator.
Thank you. And I think Alexis, you may be next.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that, you know, in the face of devastating cuts like the ones that are being proposed right now, what gives me hope is seeing the incredible number of people that show up to fight back against these types of cuts. Everybody here in this room and all the people that I get to interact with in my job, people show up not necessarily because what is being proposed will hurt them individually, but because they care about people in their community and their neighbors, and they care about us as a collective. And I just find a lot of inspiration in that, and I find a lot of hope. And so I think my action item would be to contact your members of Congress and say that what is being proposed doesn't represent where you want our country to go. And you care about kids and their health and their success at school. And this isn't going to further those goals. So thanks for everybody's contributions.
Thank you, Alexis. And Callan, you're back. We would love for you to finish your thought. Thank you.
Sorry, y'all. My
Okay.
computer died with no warning, like right in the middle of the sentence. I think what I was saying is we know we actually are seeing advocacy working. And so really taking time to sit with those wins and understand and really celebrate that we are making progress. And we are fighting back against some of the most drastic versions of these cuts, and we will continue to do that and see progress. And I think in my role as an advocate, I have never heard so many people talking about SNAP. I've never heard so many people talking about Medicaid. Friends of mine who have avoided me at dinner parties because I'm too much of a policy nerd are suddenly asking for my opinion on legislation. And so I just encourage all of us to sit with those wins and understand that there are people paying attention and like all of the fellow panelists said, continue to reach out to not just your congressional delegation, but also local legislators and your governor, because this is going to impact state budgets. And so they should be reaching out to the congressional delegation as well. So put their feet to the fire as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'll share a little bit too. I agree. Rest, try not to work too hard, even though it's difficult to say that and it's difficult not to work hard during all of this. I mean, it feels like one hit after another, after another, after another, and it just doesn't look like there's an end in sight. But there always is. I mean, in life you have storms, and right now we may be in a little bit of a rainy season, right? And so we can look to the future where things will be a little bit better. But at Food Corps, we're a small and mighty team, and we're working hard over here, just as everyone is on the screen here. And I appreciate all of you as colleagues. Thank you for what you're doing. Really appreciate you. And with that, as we begin to close, let's quickly revisit what we learned today. UnidosUS grounded us in the data, showing that there are over 34 million children relying on SNAP, and proposed cuts would disproportionately harm Latino and low-income families. Our first panel from FRAC unpacked the big three threats: freezing the thrifty food plan, cost shifting to states, and expanding time limits, and showed how these cuts don't stand alone. They also weaken school meals, summer EBT, and other child-centered supports. Then we heard from Georgia and Hawaii about how these proposals would play out in families' real lives. Across every conversation, one thing was clear today: that SNAP works and cuts would do real harm. But we also heard hope and ways we can act. Whether you're in policy, practice, or community, you have a role to play in protecting and strengthening these critical supports for kids and families. Thank you again. Michelle. It looks like you are on. Yes, there you go.
The second time today I did that.
Okay.
Thank you, Ashanti. And then Daniela, I just want to make sure, did you have a chance to answer that last question?
No, but that's okay.
You
I think
sure?
the other answers were so great.
Okay, Danielle, I am so sorry. I apologize. It is human error. I did not mean to overlook you. Kim,
Yeah, no, I think everybody else said what I was gonna say anyways, so.
I apologize.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you again to all of our incredible speakers and to Shanti for your moderation and for being with us here today. And, for guiding us in such an urgent and inspiring conversation. We're really grateful for all of your expertise, your insight, and your deep commitment to each of you bring to protecting programs that help children and families thrive. So as we wrap up, we invite everyone here today in the audience and all of us on the panel to carry forward with this sense of urgency and hope that you've heard today, and join us in taking action to ensure that children are not left behind, but centered in every policy decision ahead.